This is Blacklisted Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's live Saturday morning, it's 10 a.m. It's the 30th day of August, which is the 8th month here in the year of 2014. Working through some of the technology here today to make the broadcast possible. I don't know why the Spreaker channel, you would think it would not give us too much problems in the morning, Saturday morning. I mean, how many people are on the internet? This has to be a slow time for internet traffic, and I figured it would be an opportune time to run a stream out of the house, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's my wife watching Boardwalk Empire in the other room. Who knows? Doesn't matter. We're going to do this thing. BlacklistedRadio.com is the website dedicated to this show. My name is Doug Owen. I'm the senior editor of BlacklistedNews.com and your host for this podcast. You can follow along there at the website, live streaming every Saturday morning. And you can also follow us on Twitter at BLN Radio. That's the easiest way to do it. So a lot of things to get into. This is the weekly wrap-up. It's usually a mixture of geopolitical analysis, a little science, a little culture, a little art, a little music, and tragic comedy. So before we get to all of the headlines, I want to get into some of the other issues, I guess, that we should discuss. And first and foremost, it is trying to find the truth. It's very hard these days, and there's a lot of competing voices in the world, one of which that is, I think, very effective is the food supply, the discussion, the topic. It relates to every human being. I don't care who you are. Okay, if you're listening to this show, you're eating food. So we all have a common bond when it comes to that and culture and other things. Though different, we all have one. So it's a great starting point for conversations. So I saw this article coming out of the New York magazine, NY Mag, and it has a piece about what Bill Gates is doing with his donations and with his philanthropy by giving $6.1 million to depolarize the GMO debate. The GMO debate, if you're not familiar, genetically engineered foods are making their way to our dinner tables, and the world is pretty GMO at the moment. If you look at the rice supply, pretty much globally, it has been infected with GMO products, good or bad. We've seen some of the results, and I think that that's why the debate is so polarizing, and that is when you look at Monsanto and their Roundup products, the GE solutions of 10, 12, 15, 20 years ago were to genetically modify cotton, to modify food products for the third world that were designed to be more hardy. Now we can go to hybridization too and say, okay, well, look at what's happened with gluten and wheat. That wasn't genetically engineering a new wheat. That's just making bad wheat, and adding proteins that we thought would help in producing larger supplies of wheat. And it did, because it's shorter, stockier, has extra proteins, it has more gluten, and that's just basically the stuff that's in the stock to make it more hardy, to make it more gelatinous and able to withstand wind. Now, it's not necessarily good for you to eat tons of it because it just makes you the same way, thick and hardy and gluttonous and gooey. It's basically like eating glue. That's what gluten is. I mean, it's two proteins, but it's glue. So a bad idea. And it's had dire consequences. And it's only more scary when you think about genetic engineering. Because with hybridization, I mean, you make decisions. You're not going to have cross field contamination because of the type of wheat that you decided to grow. Open air pollination can, I guess, infect other possibly other, pollinating species or fruit-bearing species, maybe. But when it comes to genetic engineering, I mean, it's a revamping, a redesign of some of the very important DNA structures that plants have. So the rice is pretty much GMO. Cotton, hard to find things that aren't GMO, but the rise of anti-GMO products and organic farming and the interest, I think, in sustainable lifestyles and environmentally friendly lifestyles has led people to want to buy non-genetically engineered food. I mean, Roundup is a perfect example. I mean, you have to use 10 times what it was designed to use in some cases because of the superbugs that have been created because of the lack of diversification in crops. They have been decimated, and now it only takes one mutation to destroy, maybe a whole country's crop, whatever it may be. So there's been countless examples. We could spend hours upon hours going through that here on the podcast. I'll spare you. There's better podcasts that are designed to completely focus on certain issues like that. But it brings up the debate about whether or not they can win the war of words. So what Bill Gates would like to do is get you and me and everybody else out there to think about GMO foods once again. Big problem. You've got past history. Past history. It makes us skeptics because the same things that wonderful benefits that have been touted by Monsanto, by Bayer Science Corporation, we now see in hindsight were bad decisions that were not really environmental decisions. They weren't ethical decisions. They were short-term monetary decisions. That's going to be a staple and always is of this podcast, that short-term thinking leads to long-term problems for everyone in just about every case, whether it's the financial industry, short-term gains and benefits and profits end up in long-term destroying not only the company that the rent seekers take profits from, but just everything underneath that structure fails, and the people that depend on it. So out of Cornell University, which, I think a lot of the people that are buying organic food probably, would respect Cornell. So that's why Bill Gates is going right to the source. Supported by a $5.6 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Cornell Alliance for Science will help inform decision makers and consumers through an online information portal and training programs to help researchers and stakeholders effectively communicate the potential impacts of agricultural technology and how such technology works. And I think if you're going to be honest and you want to depolarize the debate, we have to look at the good things, and I'd love to hear about them. I believe in people using, in most instances, I don't believe that currently today, with human beings and self-interest and all the things that just make us human, a completely free market system can work with government, politics, and with the structuring of the economy. It just can't exist, and it hasn't existed. And the idea is that we want more and more of it. Yet, when you relinquish more and more control to private institutions, the ones that are more effectively able to lobby to have said freedom are the ones that are the most dangerous and do the worst things. You can figure out maybe who's to blame when you look at Bill Clinton, Paul Volcker, Larry Summers, the Rockefellers, Congress, the Senate, when it came to the Glass-Steagall deregulation, letting investment in mortgage broker banks become one. Now, everyone agrees that that was a bad decision, and whether they can reinstitute Glass-Steagall and whether that's relevant now today, or if that would, really change things systemically, that's arguable. But the decision for why the deregulation happened, why the quote-unquote privatization of these industries happened, was because you had people in government and people like Alan Greenspan that lobbied for this. Oh, those guys, they know what they're doing. Government can't affect you, and you're above the law anyway. Why not create trillions of dollars in derivatives? Same idea here with the global food supply. And there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of short-term investments that people like the stakeholders. I mean, just think of the buzzwords here. This thing creeps me out in one paragraph just because of the of the way that they're trying to not just win over people, but win over the decision makers. Who are those? I'd like to think it's individuals with their dollars, but that's not what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are talking about here. So anyway, you're going to see a lot more of this debate. It's going to be, I think, one of the bulkheads for global corporations to affect. I mean, Bill Gates is beyond creepy. He's a eugenicist. Some of the things that he's created, some of the philanthropy that he does, I think is valid. Saw a really interesting Mark Twain documentary on KLRU, our local PBS station, and it was paid for by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I guess I could say, well, that's not too horrible. That's not too polarizing, but I think this is only really going to serve the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that is heavily invested. So we know that it's not going to depolarize it. It's going to probably overpolarize it. So let's move forward, talk more technology, more things that worry me, things that I find to be pretty surreal. DARPA's now developing implants to, quote-unquote, heal soldiers' bodies and minds. If you haven't seen this headline, it smacks of crazy conspiracy theory 101, 10 years ago. Let me tell you, folks, they're going to put mind chips in you. Well, yeah, and people are going to want those mind chips. Those things kind of sounded silly, and, it was just, what's the word? Jocular. It's a jocular topic. Putting mind chips in people. Well, they're doing it now, and it's arguable whether or not this is a solution. I think that the problem, obviously, is that we're putting people into the meat grinder. There's a lot of other things we could do rather than traumatizing people. I mean, if you look at the science and what the solution to the problem that's being created, I mean, problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic. The one thing you can't say for the military is that they create interesting and neat technologies that we do benefit from. Society benefits from. I can't argue that, but the justification for the technology and the need is being created. Every time you hear about a new DARPA project like bioengineering new life forms or enlisting preteens to test advanced military software or other creepy things, I'll add this to the motherboard article that I'm reading from. The computers that talk to soldiers' children in lieu of them, giving them an AI experience with their faux parents, their computer parents. That stuff is just beyond the pale. And it's one of the hallmarks of this show because we discuss it and a lot of the other fear hype and political nonsense and politicians kind of, I think, take center stage, and not enough podcasts really focus on this stuff. So anyway, this is basically like a pulpy sci-fi paperback, according to Motherboard. I would say it'd be a crazy Bill Cooper broadcast that you have to listen to on grainy shortwave back in the mid-'90s. Anyway, the goal of the program, dubbed Elect RX, is the development of tiny chips that can be injected into soldiers with a needle to act as pacemakers for the nervous system. By precisely stimulating the right nerve endings with minute electromagnetic signals, the implants will treat painfully and chronic inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and mental illness, researchers say. Well, you can go on into the science of it and what they're going to be doing. I mean, they got $78 million for this project. But, it's funny because you think about, okay, well, they're going to inject you with tiny chips, whatever they may be, right? I mean, I think about a transistor or what kind of chip this would be. Chips are digital logic circuits, so obviously this thing would be monitoring different electromagnetic pulses and releasing and creating its own pulses. What it could do for your mind, though, I mean, I get it for monitoring your nervous system. I understand that. That makes sense. But to heal your brain, to release different chemicals, to basically chemically lobotomize or microchip your brain. I mean, literal microchipping of the brain to fix it for defects. I mean, the perfection of mankind and where this kind of technology will ultimately land in the next 50 years is if it does come to fruition, if they do create these technologies and they've got the finances. And I would imagine at some point these things will jump from fiction to reality. It won't be sci-fi, it'll be non-fi in 10 to 15 years. If you just look back to the 1990s and where we're at today, I mean, 20 years back, I mean, this is some silly discussions about things that we'll never have to worry about. And no one was having the debate about these technologies at the time. Anyway, they're going to try to sell you on all of the great things it does. Let me look at some of the other ones or technologies that are not so benign and altruistic. Here's one, trapped in Venezuela. If you haven't been noticing, it's not your fault. There hasn't been a lot of talk about what's happening in Venezuela, but basically you have the government eating itself. There's plenty of outside factors and people that are needling and trying to create more tension in Venezuela. U.S. partners in crime, Incorporated is there as well. A lot of different groups, the peace, democracy groups, just like in the Ukraine, that are being used, non-governmental organizations and, Freedom House, they're the same old characters, Chatham, Brookings, have little subset splinter cells that have been stirring up a lot of trouble, not to mention, using the CIA ambassadors who've now been banished from Venezuela. But all of this has kind of been going down the toilet over the last year or two. And you could probably go back, at least in recent history, to the failed assassination attempt by the U.S. on Hugo Chavez. Now, I separate the U.S. and their little soirees that they have, little parties to the geopolitical oversight of what's happening. So I think a lot of people say, well, the U.S. is trying to kill this guy. Obviously, that makes him good. You make that kind of leap. Well, and it justifies the politics and the tactics that Hugo Chavez uses. And I think that is a very simpleton way to look at it. The U.S. does bad stuff, so obviously Hugo Chavez and socialism and communism are good. Well, we're seeing some of the problems when you have an authoritarian government that wants to micromanage every aspect of the economy rather than, opening their doors, or I guess finding more liberal, more open policies that will encourage investment. It's one of the big problems. One of the problems and I guess good things about the United States is that anybody can do business here. Anybody pretty much can, if they have enough fortitude or just want to make a dangerous trip with some coyotes, can make their way into the country and do business in the United States. That's good in the sense that it brings people and entrepreneurs and businesses here, but it also opens the door for bad guys and self-interested, anti-U.S. companies individuals to set up shop in the United States. The U.S. doesn't care. It's just like, controlling the media. If you look at Venezuela and other countries like that Russia, to name one, you do have a huge amount of control, or at least want for control over the message. They don't want bloggers. They don't want critics. They don't want people out there that are bringing attention to maybe some of their own shortcomings. Well, it's the U.S. and it's the newspapers and the infiltrators that are stirring up crap and talking bad about our policy. The difference is here in the U.S., they don't mind you talking crap because it's really the debate about who's got power. And so one of the things that's really effective in U.S. policy is allowing people to talk crap, allowing you and me and everybody else out there to be critics of the U.S. government, still going ahead and doing their own thing. That's one of the big problems that a lot of other countries, especially the left-leaning socialist types, have, and that is just letting people have that honest debate. Because ultimately, if you're doing things right, if you're doing things in an honest and transparent way, then you don't have to hide behind censorship. You don't have to worry about controlling the message. That's one thing that the U.S. is great at, is allowing people to control their own message and just using money to blind out those messages and to use companies to franchise the U.S. mission and direction of their foreign policy. They're able to do that much more effectively than Russia, than a lot of these South American countries, one of which, Venezuela, we're talking about, has decided to biometrically scan the eyeballs and fingertips of all Venezuelans wanting to buy food, because you can't buy too much food. This is the problem. Now you have this complete governmental central control over foodstuffs, and the usual rhetoric. We have to do this because of the bad capitalists and the evil capitalist people out there that are making us do this, rather than maybe looking at what we're doing with the nationalization of companies and how that has worked against them. You have to allow people to do what they want to do and say what they want to say. And that's where you're going to find a lot of problems. So there's a lot of people that are trying to escape Venezuela right now. There is a humanitarian crisis. There is a big problem. And the affluent, just like in Honduras, the people that have the means, the wherewithal, the foresight, the people that can see what's coming down the mountain, they are trying to escape Venezuela. This comes from Mike Mish Shedlock. Every day the cost of a plane ticket out of Venezuela goes up. That assumes you can get a plane or a plane ticket, and you probably cannot, even if you booked it 3 months ago. Delta Airlines, American Airlines, and Lufthansa cut the number of flights. Air Canada stopped all service. The economy class tickets to New York City cost as much as $3,000 if you can get them, and you probably can't. Instead, people take 5-day rides to Lima, Peru as a means of escape, and that takes money as well. So it's expensive. You got to now make your pilgrimage out of the country. Trapped in Venezuela, this piece here from the Wall Street Journal kind of highlights this. With the cash-strapped government holding back on releasing $3.8 billion in airline ticket revenue because of strict currency controls, carriers have slashed service to Venezuela by half since January, adding another layer of frustration to daily life there. The lack of flights is complicating family vacations, business trips, and evacuation plans of Venezuelans who want to leave the country, which is whipsawed by 60% inflation, crime, food shortages, a diminishing job sector. Prospects are slim. Stephen H. Hankey, a Johns Hopkins University economics professor, says Venezuela tops his so-called misery index, which takes into account inflation, unemployment, economic stagnation, and other factors in 89 countries. So while the Venezuelan government does everything it can to isolate the bad U.S. actors, and I'm not saying that they're not out there, but opening your doors to China, opening your doors to other nations may be the only thing that they can do in a controlled economy. So, I don't know what their solution is, obviously. And even if I had put together a 20-point plan for the Venezuelan economic crises and how to avoid a U.S. takeover, good luck selling that to the Venezuelan government. So, really, my thoughts on this don't bear much weight, but the takeaway, I think, ultimately from this is that, the economy gets out of control, and before you know it, you're stuck. Only the rich can escape. That's what we have in this country now. Headline that I just posted this morning, speaking of which, I didn't think I would discuss, but think it's pretty relevant to discussion. 422% increase in the price to leave the land of the free. This comes from Simon Black. Pop quiz. What do actor Jet Li, opera singer Maria Callas, writer T.S. Eliot, financier John Temple, actress Elizabeth Taylor, and Queen Noor of Jordan all have in common? They are all former U.S. citizens who went through the formal process of relinquishing or renouncing their citizenships. And this is what's popular now. I mean, if you look at the U.S., cash-strapped, the inflation through the roof. The parallels between what's happening in Venezuela and what's happening in the U.S. are there. And so it's not really people in the middle class that can escape, that have a plan to escape. It's not even the poor, which, I mean, what is the middle class and the poor? Pretty much the same demographic these days. And the majority of Americans make up those two classes. I would say 300 million of them. But there's a lot of people that have the means, have the wherewithal, have the cash, and have an opportunity outside of the U.S. and they can live pretty well. And I don't think they're going to Venezuela, but you can leave the U.S. and I think about it all the time. My son, according to the economist out there, according to the IRS, he's already $72,000 into debt just by getting a Social Security number in this country. Good thing right now, you can leave the country. You can relinquish your debt. You can take on another citizenship. I don't know if you have to be a citizen somewhere to relinquish your citizenship. I mean, can't you just reside places? Can you be a world citizen? Possibly. Corporations are able to do that. But it's becoming more popular for the rich and the almost rich, the almost elite to leave the country. The actors, the lawyers, the pretty much the same, I guess. Same demographic, same group of people that might leave the country, that it would be advantageous for them to leave the country. Companies are now leaving the country. Burger King and Tim Hortons. I talked about this on Doomcast 56 with Charlie McGrath. And they are leaving, expatriating the country. And why wouldn't they? I mean, if you look at the McDonald's deal, the Barack Obama regime, I hate to use that term because I know that Rush Limbaugh, it immediately, for some of you more progressive people, hear that and say, oh, sounds like Rush Limbaugh. But it is a regime. They are acting outside of the constitutionality of the government. If you look at Eric Holder and his... just what he's doing with the Wall Street financial takeover, nothing, Fast and Furious, Lois Lerner. I mean, that whole thing is turned into, I don't know how they don't just impeach this guy. I mean, they destroyed the BlackBerry. I know I'm going off on a tangent here. Not only were her emails eaten by the machine, her BlackBerry was destroyed after the subpoena by Congress. I mean, you just go down the list of things that seem like, okay, this is a criminal investigation. This is no longer something that is just, an attack. I mean, I guess it's always been a criminal investigation, but these are things that real hardened criminals, the destruction of evidence. You do that, you try to flush a joint down your toilet when you're being raided, they'll give you 5 years for something like that, destruction of evidence. I mean, who knows what you might do? But this is blatant, in your face, corruption and crime. It's got to be very frustrating to the right and the people that really are shocked by that. It's not shocking to me, but nonetheless, the whole deal with the McDonald's being exempted with Obamacare has to be a big slight to companies like Burger King and KFC. Why do they get to escape having to pay those penalties and pay for the health care of their, poverty workers? They lobbied. So, I kind of see this a tit for tat. with Burger King wanting to leave the country and buying Tim Hortons so that they can, get themselves into one of those, what do they call it? The Dutch sandwich, where you go through Ireland with your money and then it goes into the Netherlands and then it comes back out pretty much laundered, tax-free at the lowest rate possible. I mean, that's what all these actors and stars like Bono and Sting do with their money. Is it the Irish sandwich or Dutch sandwich? Anyway, if you got enough money to Dutch sandwich it, congratulations to you for having that much money. You're probably not listening to this podcast. It's probably irrelevant to you, but I mean, that's how business is done. I think a lot of people are, of course, the Obama message is, well, you have to pay your fair share this war. You got to pay your fair share for the education. I mean, the conscription and brainwashing of the children and the highways. Got to pay for the highways. Don't forget that in the war. Freedom. It's such a bankrupt argument these days. I don't know how they keep going with it. Anyway, so I guess when it comes back to what's happening in Venezuela, that is a potential for what could happen in this country, and it parallels what's already happening to the upper crust of the U.S. population and corporate individuals, those corporation identities, trying to leave the country. All right, so we have some other interesting notes. Sister of alleged Boston Marathon bomber arrested for bomb threat. It's interesting. KABC has this one. The sister of the alleged Boston Marathon bomber was arrested on Wednesday for allegedly threatening a Harlem woman. According to the New York Police Department, Alana Sarnev, who lives in North Bergen, New Jersey, allegedly called the victim on Monday saying, quote, "I have people that can go over there and put a bomb on you." The NYPD believes that the alleged victim is the mother of Sarnev's boyfriend's child, baby mama. Sarnev was charged with aggravated harassment. She will have to appear in court on September 30th. Just weird. Weird. And, to make these kind of comments, you have to feel that you're above the law or that you're working maybe with the law or the FBI has your back. You have to know. I don't care how dense this girl is. You have to know that the FBI is listening to every word that's being said on your phone. If you don't believe that, then you're an idiot. And I just don't believe these people are that dense, that dumb, that out of touch to think that the U.S. government would not be tapping your phone. It just makes no sense to me. The only thing that does make sense is that she believes that that's okay to do. And that makes me believe that she's probably working as an informant with the FBI or worse or better in her case, I guess, maybe. So I guess the counter punch to that would be, well, she's going to jail. They have brought charges against her and she's been arrested. So not sure what to do with that. I mentioned perception management at the beginning of the show and how the U.S. is better at doing that by allowing people like us to dissenters to be able to have a conversation outside of the purview of government control. And that in and of itself allows a little bit of pseudo freedom, keeps people, I think, at least not as fearful of their government and more apt to just be apathetic, saying, "Oh well, they don't care what you're saying, whatever, man." They're not driving by with black vans and picking up people for being hypercritical of the government yet. Could happen, probably won't, not in the near future, because the current system today, the way it works, is perfected. Thousands of years in the making for this panopticon. But anyway, perception management's important. Chelsea Clinton has been getting $26,000 for every minute that she was a so-called alleged, possibly, but not really, a reporter for NBC. So NBC has been caught with their pants down. They've been paying Chelsea Clinton $600,000 since 2011 annually to be an NBC reporter. Now, she's reported on nothing. There's been no reporting. like they said here, for every minute that she's been on NBC, they've had to pay her $26,000, almost 28. So this is a way for NBC, of course, obviously, to get access to Hillary Clinton and the Clintons, and to be an insider, to be the preferential news organization. So this is just, this is cronyism in media. This is political access. This is payola for NBC. This is probably criminal. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not a lawyer, but I would argue that this is criminal. I think that this is just massive amounts of propaganda, and they finally got caught. And there was a big story that caught wind a few months ago about this, and they're like, we need to part ways, Chelsea. I'm sorry. You're not only God ugly, but you don't really have anything to say. You've never had a job, and working with your mother and father's foundation and becoming a multi-billionaire and married to a Jewish lawyer doesn't really qualify you to say shit about anything. You have no opinion on anything because you're an idiot. You're a coddled baby. Ugh. I wish they would say that. Don't you wish that was the honest assessment? Look, Chelsea, you're just a spoiled bitch, okay? We're not going to give you any more money. Not hardly. Not quite. Talking about some other bad guys, people that are in the Matrix, people that we should be wary of. And I think a great counterpoint to all of those that believe that we do need Big Brother, we do need an electronic panopticon to keep us safe. Just think about who you're empowering here. Federal Cybersecurity Director found guilty on porn charges. I will say that this could be levied at anyone. Maybe this guy was an outsider. If he maybe stood up to the wrong person, could easily be caught. But we do know that when it comes to the Pentagon and what's happening there, lots of child pornography has been routed through the Pentagon. Even Anderson Cooper did a big CNN expose. Even the controlled, compromised corporate media was in bed with this. And maybe this is being used to target individuals. I'm not exactly sure. Can't really know. I always want to look at the other side of that. Maybe this guy is just being run up the ladder, and they're just trying to get him out of the way now. As the acting cybersecurity chief of a federal agency, Timothy DeFoggi, DEFOGGI, should have been well versed in the digital footprints users leave behind online when they visit websites and download images. And this is what makes me suspect. Wouldn't this guy know better? Shouldn't he have known better? I guess you get cops all the time that do ridiculous things that should have known better, and you would think that he would be more careful. But I don't know. Some people just like getting caught. It's not above just mania. People having just no wherewithal, caught up, crazy, just crazy people. Anyway, DeFoggi convicted today in Maryland, and this came out on the 27th of this week. He was convicted in Maryland on 3 child porn charges, including conspiracy to solicit and distribute child porn. Must have believed his use of the Tor entomizing network shielded him from federal investigators. Now, how would this guy not know that Jacob Applebaum and these other spies, these other insiders for the U.S. and the NSA itself had not helped develop and create Tor? The U.S. military, the U.S. Army created Tor, at least invested in the creation of the Tor browser. Shame on this guy. So that's why I wonder. I think there's more. There's a bigger story here, and I think the only way to really know if if that's the case would be whether he commits suicide in the very near future or goes crazy. I don't know. They could probably just keep this guy whacked out. But anyway, his career's over. His life's over. When he goes to jail, he will probably be raped. And that might be the way that the powers that be want it. But anyway, it was a big story. And I think that we do have the obvious opportunity to say, well, this is what happens when you give people too much power, and look at the people that obviously are attracted and seek those positions. At the same time, there's kind of this meme that, well, you're not safe. We will find you too. That nobody's above the law. And I don't know if that's the subtle, more meta takeaway that a lot of people are getting from this, and that is, well, see, because we caught them, that means that there is transparency. Anyway, things are happening between the U.S. and Russia. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been a focus, a topic on this show quite often for years now, back when it was in vogue, or not in vogue, before it was a popular item. One of the reasons that people don't think, or lots of analysts didn't believe, that we could see an alignment between China and Russia. And just a little background, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is the predecessor to the BRICS. It is an economic, now military cooperation between China, Russia, and other former Soviet states and other outliers in South America. There's lots of observer members now: Iran, India, Pakistan, all of the stands, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and the like, are part of this unification, this counterbalance, as it is so called, to NATO. So you have NATO and you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Most of the people didn't believe that this would ever stick because China has territorial claims against Russia. Russia is able to, at least before what's happened in Ukraine, has been able to sell and expand products to markets in the West. And many people believed, especially through the Bill Clinton era to present, that China and Russia would always hold each other at a distance because of some of these things that go back to the 1920s, some of these territorial claims and the like. So point being that there would not be this cohesion. Now, because of what's happening with the sanctioning of Russia, Russia is now really cozying up. I mean, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization started back in 92, I believe, early 90s, but has been not really, just not respected in its function and in its power until now. And just last week, we had the biggest ever. That's only 10,000 soldiers. I know a lot of people say, well, 10,000 soldiers isn't a huge meeting and gathering, gaming of war, but 10,000 soldiers participating in a large-scale, largest ever war drill, as they call it, and they've used the politically correct anti-terrorism drill that they now conduct annually. So the Shanghai Organization war drills just recently happened. But over the last 24 hours, there's been the alleged invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I say alleged because I don't trust NATO. They've lied before. The intelligence is always cooked and politicized. You can't trust Kiev. They're a satellite state of the CIA. They are, their intelligence, if there is any, is U.S. intelligence, and they originate from the same perspective as the U.S., and we already know how the U.S. feels about it because Barack Obama is our voice for the world, and he's already spoke through sanctions and basically used not even real evidence. I mean, when it comes to MH17, now in retrospect, I think there's a lot of compelling proof that the Ukrainians shot it down. Not only do they have a lot of at least circumstantial and somewhat verified evidence, some forensic evidence, if you will, to say that the story with the Buk missile launchers, all of that was bullcrap. Mainly the physical evidence with some of the planes looking like they were strafed by machine guns. Just a lot of oddities that kind of break the potential for the story to be real. The U.S. side that has been embraced to use sanctions and at every turn we've seen. The truth be damned, it's really just accusations and the possibility of this being true that was used as a way to make those stick. So, obviously the agenda is there, but nonetheless, it could be happening. I don't put it past Russia. And just yesterday, the IMF now approves a $1.39 billion bailout of the Ukrainian government. Will that be used to buy weapons? Will that be used to buy energy and distribute energy to the Ukrainians this winter? Because winter is coming, my friends, just like many have predicted. We're going to probably see tens of thousands of people potentially dying in the Ukraine unless something's done. It's going to be cold. And so if there's no gas, there is going to be problems. The question is, will there be gas, and what's going to be the solution? Can Frackademia figure out a way to fix the gap to fill the void for Gazprom and Rosneft? I don't know. They're fracking the F out of the country. Joe Biden and his nephew and all of the other stakeholders and assets, the Chevrons of the world, the partners in war crime. Are they going to be able to provide a solution? Are they going to reverse the pipelines and actually send energy from Europe through Turkey? I mean, the pipeline fights are already paving the way for the complete decimation of the civilian infrastructure. What's left of it? What hasn't been bombed? And in what we know of, and in all of these different transits, how many of those pipelines have been destroyed? Do we know if they've been destroyed? It's hard to say. I don't think that we know, but it could be a worse situation than we've been told on the ground. Anyway, things are happening. The U.S. is moving 10,000 troops to Poland, allegedly, and Poland basically shut down airspace. There's been a row, at least allegedly, over this Russian defense minister's jet being turned away and not allowed to fly through the Polish airspace. So these things are definitely provocative. RT is reporting this, but the Financial Times is the source. Denmark's already sent 50 troops. There's a little blurb on Blacklisted News about some of the new troop movements, and yes, they are bringing heavy weaponry with them. They're doing this at the U.S.'s request. So check that out. But RT already has this from the Financial Times saying that Denmark, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Norway, the Netherlands, Canada are also sending people. They are sending NATO troops, ground troops, into Ukraine. So this is going to become basically a NATO offensive if all of this ends up happening. Cooler heads may prevail. Something may change, but it's not looking good. I want to give a little attention to Kevin over at Cryptagon's analysis of what's happening in the Ukraine. And he has it very bluntly. I think there's a lot of people that are, pro-Putin. They think that he's better or smarter and less of an authoritarian than Obama. And of course, when you don't live under somebody's rule, you can say, well, he seems like a nice guy. He seems smarter. I like what he's saying. But you can make that same claim for Obama in 2006. I liked what he was saying. I liked the idea of transparency, accountability, getting big money out of big politics. It sounds great. We don't buy the bull, but it is what it is. So Vladimir Putin referring to new Eastern Ukraine as new Russia. Why? Why is he doing this? Is this true? Is this a real translation? Cryptagon has it. Western elite stole Ukraine from a deranged dictator with a bogus populist uprising. Now, kleptocrat Putin is stealing it back with irregulars, mercenaries, and tanks. Is that a fair assessment? I'll read it one more time. Western elite stole Ukraine from a deranged dictator with a bogus populist uprising. Now, kleptocrat Putin is stealing it back with irregulars, mercenaries, and tanks. I think that that's a pretty fair statement as to what has happened. Don't come to the conclusion that Putin is some sort of good guy. Putin is just like Western elites, but with a more direct approach and what amounts to a personal arsenal of nuclear weapons. There are no good guys here. Murderers? Yes. Thieves? Yes. And on both sides. I very seriously doubt that the U.S.-led gang will do anything real about this. Putin could roll over the whole of Ukraine in a day if he wanted to. Obama just keeps golfing because he has probably been advised that it isn't worth a thermonuclear exchange. You win some, you lose some. Move on, pick another victim. Pro tip, make sure the next victim doesn't have a competing gang with nuclear weapons. It's a good point. They went after Ukraine, thought that they were going to be able to steal the Ukraine and make it their own, and, well, maybe underestimated Putin's investment. Now they're trying to shame Putin, and, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to risk geothermal nuclear war? Obama says no, we're not going to. NATO says maybe. NATO is going to also, of course, use this as a great time or a great opportunity to create a European army. Why wouldn't they? So anyway, Putin said himself yesterday, quote, "It's best not to mess with us. Thank God I think no one is thinking of unleashing a large-scale conflict with Russia. I want to remind you that Russia is one of the leading nuclear powers." End quote. That is a direct statement. There's nothing that you can really take away from it other than what it means, other than what he is saying to the T. We've got nuclear weapons. It's a good thing that U.S. and anybody else thinking about this in Europe doesn't want geothermal nuclear war, okay? Because we will blow you up. That's the only way it could be more direct. If you continue, we will start bombing the world. I mean, it's the only thing that he can say that would be, I guess, more of a threat. Anyway, yep, the managers of that idiot, Obama, better make sure he remains on the golf course this time, or maybe point and click the drones to go take out some of ISIS's maniacs. It's only costing $7.5 million per day to bomb a problem that the U.S. created in the first place. Bargains, bargains, bargains. All that said, here's what I wrote to a family member with a Russian girlfriend. Quote, "I'd seriously consider getting her and her money out of there ASAP. You wouldn't want her to be in Putin land or holding Putin bucks if this thing gets any worse." Via the International Business Times, in a news statement, the Kremlin has detailed Russian President Vladimir Putin's address to pro-Russian separatists battling Kyiv's force in eastern Ukraine, which referred to the rebels as the Militia of New Russia, or Novorossiya. Take it for what it is. Read the translation yourself. Is this the militia of the New Russia? Is this where the New Russia will reign? Will there be a line? Will we have another east and west wall? It's going to be like Germany. I don't know. I don't know what's going to ultimately happen, but I think that the political will and the unity of the Kyiv government is falling to pieces, and we have another failed state like what is playing out or what is culminating in Libya. Another failed state, central government, all of the legitimacy that surrounded the pageantry, okay, all of the ceremonies and the faux elections and all of that pageantry goes away, and then people are like, ugh, let's go back to the square. And people are back in the square in Kyiv, protesting, throwing Molotov cocktails, and the Western media doesn't care. The Western media is out to lunch, and Victoria Nuland and John McCain, they don't give a crap. They've moved on, okay? They have another focus. They've got another bad guy to deal with, another global issue that they have created. That is ISIS, and that's where I think most of this is going to end up shifting. So we're going to hear more about the Ukraine. I don't know if it's going to be more of a, well, we tried. Bad Putin. More sanctions, more isolation. I think ultimately this is a bad deal for the Russian people too, because this is going to affect them. So there's no winners in this. There's no good guys. I think that's the big takeaway from this this broadcast is that there are no good guys when it comes to the Ukrainian conflict. Definitely not in Europe. Definitely not in Russia. And the people, the individuals, the citizens, are always the victims. And the question is, can you escape? Do you have a Venezuela situation when things turn bad? Hopefully this show gives you a little bit of entertainment and some good insight into the things that are happening today, and maybe that's a valuable, maybe it's useful in your day-to-day life. If it is, I want to thank Sarah. Number one, she gave us $15, and I have made the promise I will not make French impersonations anymore. And we received a little bit of support from a few others. Got $1 or something from one guy. I don't know if that's just a joke, but kind of. It's one of those things. It's like, thanks, but it's $1 something. And once PayPal, you basically gave money to PayPal. So don't do that. We also accept Bitcoin, snail mail, all of the ways that you can support the show is there at blacklistedradio.com. If you'd like it to continue, if you enjoy it and you share it with more and more people, we will continue to do it. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for being part of the broadcast. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm always tweeting out stuff that's not on the news feed at BLN Radio. That is our handle. You can also follow us on YouTube / I don't know what the handle is for that. Just look for Blacklisted Radio in your search engine, and you shall find this show. It's pretty easy to do. I'll be back next week for another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. Until then, take care, my friends.